This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
It's 11:07 at WPSL 1590, the talk of the Treasure Coast. You're on Ask a Rabbi and, I guess, Ask an Imam today, huh?
No, not an imam, but
close.
there we go.
That's all right. That's okay.
Yeah. So this is Rabbi Shafir Lobb, and you. Do we have a headset for Mohammed? Here we go.
We did have.
We are putting things together here. Sorry about that. You can see him on the live cast. And so here we are with, this is Rabbi Shafir Lobb of Congregation Eitz Chaim. And I am very, very pleased to have Mohammed Malik with me, who is a leader in our local Islamic community. Would you settle for that? Do you have a title?
I actually don't. I would just like to prefer I'm a student and coordinator.
Okay. There you go. So this is, of course, the holy month of Ramadan. So a Ramadan Mubarak to you.
Thank you.
And to all of our Muslim listeners. And Mubarak means blessed. May it be a source of blessing to those who engage in the practice. May they find the repentance and the soul searching and the hard work that goes into this amazing month of reflection. And so with that, if anyone has a question for me or for Mohammed, please feel free to give us a call at 772-340-1590 right here on WPSL. And I'll let Greg do all of the extra stuff that goes along with that, with the station ID.
We're going all over the place. Yeah.
Yes, we are. We're at Alexa and Google Home and all those other things. So you can listen to us many different ways. And, of course, we're obviously also Facebook Living as we do it. And you'll see us on YouTube. And that's a great shot there, Craig. So
yeah, that will be up tomorrow.
Yeah,
we'll have
okay.
that up on our YouTube channel. We've got over 1,000 shows up there.
And that's a cool
very
thing.
Cool. Yeah.
So people can watch this or previous episodes. And for those of you who can see us, you can tell that we've got some distance between everybody in the studio. And so it's a great time. And, of course, I brought in fresh, wonderful mangoes from my 2 trees in the backyard. I have had dozens of mangoes. I've been giving them out all over the place because there's more than I can eat here. I think there's more than I can put in my freezer. So...
Well, I know Carol will want a couple of those.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
I will tell you, they are delicious. I will have mango withdrawal when the season is over after I work through whatever I've stuffed in the freezer. My freezer is quite full because they're beautiful, they're ripe, and the recent winds have helped it come down. So a little bit for those who don't know the history of Ramadan. Ramadan is a reflection of the month that Muhammad, peace and blessings upon him, fasted. But would you like to tell us some more about it, Muhammad, since I'm not the Muslim?
As far as the Prophet Muhammad goes, the Islamic tradition is that obviously Islam and Christianity being monotheistic faiths coming from the Prophet Abraham, who had 2 sons, and the Judaism and the Christian lineage comes through his son Isaac, while the lineage of Prophet Muhammad comes through his other son Ishmael. Basically, according to our teachings, that God had commanded Abraham to take his wife Hagar and his son Ishmael and to take them to Mecca and leave them there, and that's where they flourished, and they built the first house of God in Mecca, and from there the community flourished, and then eventually ended up becoming pagans. And that's where Prophet Muhammad was sent to teach the pagans monotheism. And as with all prophets, he was also rejected and had to go through many difficulties before he was finally accepted. But he was the revelation of the Quran was given to him over a period of 23 years, and the first revelation came in the month of Ramadan. And the big thing about Ramadan that most people don't know is that we Muslims fast from sunrise all the way to sunset, and the big phrase you hear all the time is not even water. So,
Right.
I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you
You'd be
do
amazed what your body can do when it has to do it. It really is.
Okay,
I'll give
okay.
you. I'll give you a perfect example. I can't do a push-up for the life of me. I can't. And I was in college and had to take a PE course, and we had to take a test at the end of the course, and had to do so many push-ups in front of everybody. I couldn't believe how many push-ups I did because I had to out of that fear. So it's amazing what your body can do sometimes when it has to. And obviously I'm a pretty healthy person, as you can see. Throughout the year, trust me, I have a hard time managing my diet. I really, really do. But during Ramadan, it just happens. It just
You get into the
yeah.
you get into the mode.
You do, yeah. The first 2 or 3 days are a little hard, but then your stomach actually starts shrinking. And the fact that we get up early in the morning before dawn, we have a pre-dawn meal, and nowadays, trust me, when you get up and you don't have time for your metabolism to get going, you really can't eat much. I ended up maybe having a little bit of Gatorade, some fruit. That's about all I have in the morning. And then I go the whole day without food or water. And in the evening, we try to have dinner, but your stomach shrinks. You can't eat that much anymore. There are some people that, I don't know how they do it. They have fried foods and stuff like that at sundown, but I just don't know how they do it. I just try to keep it healthy during the whole month.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just amazed about the water. That's amazing.
So I'll show that's even saliva.
No, you can have some. You
can have saliva, okay.
Swallow your saliva. Yeah, you're not
Yeah.
gonna go around spitting all day.
Yeah, I understand. But it's it's all of the sunlight hours.
Yeah. And one of the things about Ramadan, which I actually, even though I was born Muslim, I came across this over the last 5 years. It's very, very. It really humbled me and made me realize something. As far as the mercy of God goes, the Islamic calendar works off of the lunar calendar, which is 10 days shorter. So every year Ramadan moves up 10 days. So over a period of 36 years, we will have fasted in every single season. Yeah. And
Okay.
what makes that fair is think about this: people that live in the southern hemisphere, and there's people that live in the northern hemisphere.
Oh, sure.
So you have sundown sometimes, like in Sweden and stuff, they're fasting 17 hours. And then people in the southern hemisphere right now, they're fasting shorter. So it's a complete balance and the mercy of God that I look at it, that he's fair and to everybody.
Over time.
Okay, if you're a Muslim and you're in Alaska, you'd really have a difficult time.
Right. But then in about 15 years or so from now,
It'll be the opposite.
Wow.
yeah.
Okay.
So it'll cycle through.
Wow. Okay.
Right. Yeah, because the Islamic lunar calendar is not intercalated, right? Certain calendars are intercalated to the solar calendar. The Jewish calendar is also a lunar calendar.
Right.
Right, so we're in the Hebrew month of Iyar right now. But eventually, every 3 years, the Muslim calendar skips a month and goes to a different month for us because it jumps on lunar units.
The Judaic calendar.
Well, the Jewish calendar adds a leap month,
Yeah.
and so that'll shift it a month. Because when we have a leap year Jewishly, it's a whole month, which is why the Jewish calendar against the Gregorian calendar looks like it does this wild dance. It's also why the Chinese calendar, right, Chinese New Year, comes sometime in January, February. They're also a lunar calendar, but they're also intercalated to the solar calendar. And as I've explained a couple of other shows, that's because those societies were more tied to the harvests and the
Agrarian,
and
yeah.
the agrarian part of it,
Yeah.
and so they had to stay kind of in sync to the seasons. Whereas Muhammad, being a city dweller, was not as tied to the crops. Right? It didn't have the, you can't have the lambing festival when the lambs aren't lambing. It's kind of it's kind of tied. So the Jewish festivals have this agrarian aspect to them, Right. So, for example, right now we're in a process called the Omer, which is the counting between Passover and Shavuot, which is coming the end of May. And it's a 50-day count. It's the barley harvest.
Oh, okay.
Okay. At the end of it, the barley is harvested. Right at the beginning of it, and you can't start Passover until the barley has sprouted. So, you've got this cycle, and it's counting the barley harvest. So there's this deep agrarian piece that causes the Jewish calendar to have leap years, because the solar system is not a perfect lunar calendar. All right, it's 365 and a quarter plus or minus days, right? And the people who think that the universe operates on the atomic clock in Boulder, I'm sorry, God didn't have that. God might know what's going on, but God didn't have the clock to tie God's self to. Okay. Yeah, it sounds kind of silly when you look back on it with some perspective, but our sense of time, that we've got, plus or minus X number of seconds, and that's an interesting thing, right? Because having had some experience in radio over the years,
couple of semesters,
having started in college in the radio station, when I first started, we had to do the station ID at the hour and half hour, plus or minus. You had only like 2 minutes, so you had this 4-minute plus minus, and that was great until songs started being 5 and 6 minutes long, and then if you weren't careful as a DJ, you got yourself in a whole lot of trouble. Not so much on the hour, because people were more mindful of that because shows change on the hour, but they didn't always change at the half hour. And so, it was common to queue up a song, not be watching the clock, and boom, I was like, oh no, I can't do a station ID. So they actually increased it, but they made it tighter. In the old days, if you skipped a few seconds, nobody really paid attention because the clocks weren't that accurate. But today they're much more accurate, and, the record of what you did or didn't do, much more time. You can tell to the second when somebody did something.
Or when the radio stations used to speed up the speed of the turntables because you were playing much more music.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a joke.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sure.
There were all kinds of stuff like that. So time is an interesting relative thing. Right.
Yeah.
But I will say this, that a lot of people don't realize that Muslims, the Arab world, gave us the movement that's usually called Swiss. Yeah, remember that.
Wait a minute, the Swiss watch?
Remember that the Moors came into Spain.
Yeah.
And brought with them wonderful things, guitars, the Swiss movement, which became known as the Swiss movement.
Wow.
And a number of other things. So, you got to look at what are the things that are important within a society, and then you're going to start to see a little bit. They also gave incredible medical procedures, surgical procedures. Mm-hmm. People don't understand some of the wealth.
Quarantine came from the Arabs.
Well, yeah, and my theory is that that's because, unfortunately, disease has always traveled along trade routes, and always will.
And you've talked about the trade routes.
Or the Silk Road,
forever.
stuff came up and down, And you don't have to look very far to get an understanding of that. Right? You look at the Christian tradition of frankincense and myrrh, and you look at the Jewish tradition of the incense that was used in the temple. Those come from plants that didn't grow in Judea or Israel or Samaria. So it's not like it's local. It had to come through the trade route. And that is a big, important piece of Islamic history as well, because the Saudi Peninsula, right, which is where Mecca is, has a wonderfully short passage from Asia down into it, down where, and my geography is going to get a little bit weak, but up around Qatar and that area.
Yeah.
It comes right there's a really short little hop, so people could trade across the water, and it would come across the peninsula along the city route, Mecca, Medina, and up there, and come in and then down into Africa. So there is the land bridge that's Judea and Israel and Samaria, that area, part of what's modern Israel and Jordan and Palestine in that area. Right, that area is a land bridge, but there's also just a really short water gap at the tip of the peninsula. And so trade very often involved the Arabian Peninsula. And we see that in the travels of some of the Asian religious leaders as well. They frequently traveled the corners of the Arabian Peninsula. So
a lot of those spices were brought into that.
Right, a lot of the spices are brought in and brought out. China is going to give us paper. They're going to give us silk. And that's why it's called the Silk Road, because China is a big hub on some of that travel. And, of course, it is for us as well. We have a land bridge, or used to have it, up along the Bering Strait that comes down. And some of those bats that everybody's talking about travel along that land bridge and come into Alaska and down into Canada and down toward Washington State along that line, which is why scientists have been really looking at the COVID to see, is it something that the animals are still carrying? Is cross-contamination still likely from the animals and their stuff, right? And, you say, well, but yes, they do. Right, because they poop all over the place, and that poop ends up in places, and it's just it's a natural, what's called natural organic communal spread, and so the question is, are bats still carrying that mutated virus, or was it a one-time jump into a mammal, and did it pass that way? And when you realize that 6 degrees of separation is not new. Even in the old trade routes, when there weren't as many people on the planet, you were still only so many degrees of separation from everybody else. And so things did travel. The plague traveled, right? Ebola has traveled. We still have Ebola, folks. It's just that there's a bigger effort to try to keep it contained inside the communities in Africa in which it lives. But we've got all kinds of things that we've had. The Spanish flu didn't start in Spain either. It just, it gets, these viruses and these contaminants get names all over the place depending on where they surface and where they hit critical numbers. And it's not like everybody who comes in contact with anything is necessarily going to have it. I've talked about that too. There's 2 measures that the health community uses. And I just was reading actually this morning, World Health Organization is saying that this virus is going to stay, which that makes complete sense. All the other viruses are still here. It's just that the antibodies and the vaccines keep them, quote unquote, to a lower level. And I'm gonna go on record and say those levels are not low, folks. Those levels are still horrendously high. It's just that it's not new. It's not novel. And so it's not scary. So next year when COVID is still here, because I believe it will be, it won't be as new. And a 3rd year and a 4th year, it'll have become an old enemy, and we kind of know it. And that's why I think so many traditions, Islam, Judaism, and Zoroastrian, a lot of those traditions have hand washing as a critical part of the tradition. So, and maybe Mohammed can talk a little bit about this, but you're not supposed to pray with dirty hands.
Oh, that's intriguing. Yeah.
Not dirty.
Not just dirty hands.
Not dirty in the sense of like dirt, but like filth.
Elevated.
Filth.
Yeah.
Right.
Spiritual filth.
Yeah.
Right. So, you wouldn't come into the mosque dirty, one would hope, just as you wouldn't go into a party dirty, or you wouldn't go into a church or synagogue dirty, theoretically. Everything, of course, is theoretically. But the idea is that you clean. And with Judaism, it's also before you handle food. Slightly different traditions, slightly different pieces of it, how it's done, but it's all basically the same theme, that you come in clean and then you wash the last little bit of stuff off of you so that you are as pure and as clean as you can be when you approach the divine. So, and that's why you'll see a lot of washing in a mosque before you go in to pray. Ablutions.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, ablution, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah. And some of that I have to believe, some of it probably has some roots down inside infectious protocols. Right. Jewish scripture talks about people having infections and how the priest of all people would go and look, probably not touch, but look, and, certain tests to see, is that infection that you've got contagious or not contagious, and close you away for 7 days and check and see what the progress is. Isolate people, self-quarantine, a lot of that kind of thing goes on. So in Judaism, if you touch a corpse of an animal or a human, you are unclean until that evening, then you wash and can come back. And that, I'm sure, has some roots in contagious protocols, because they're just too similar.
Well,
It doesn't say that, but
in back in the day, if you will, I mean,
they didn't have vaccines. And
and there was at the mortuaries, I mean, the bodies were not treated either.
Yeah.
Which they are now.
Yeah, well, especially American ones.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's one of the things we learned in the war in Vietnam was that Americans did not decay as quickly as the natives because of the amount of formaldehyde in our diet. So I will say these mangoes do not have formaldehyde in them.
Formaldehyde-free mangoes. I love it.
Well, there's a value in organic, which is that you have less and less of some of those chemicals in your body. And there's a value in that. We are slowly tearing our bodies down, and we don't give our bodies the respect that it needs. And in some ways, here's the segue. I think that Ramadan is a Muslim invitation to adherents to get more in touch with their bodies.
It's part of it. Definitely part of it. Because, like I said, again, with me, throughout the year, I can eat. I mean, you take me to any town, I can probably tell you what's a good place to eat at. But in Ramadan, I'm able to much more control that. It's more about our desires and just being able to curb our desires. We were talking about the eating part of it and the fasting part of it being the central part of Ramadan. Believe it or not, the hardest part of Ramadan is the lack of sleep. Because you got to get up early to have a pre-dawn meal. Then you have your dawn prayer, and sometimes you go back to bed. But even then, that's interrupted sleep.
Yeah.
It's just not the same. Like I did that this morning, and I got like another 2 hours in, but still, it's interrupted, and it's not the same.
Especially if you have some of that good Arabian coffee.
No, I can't. I'm laying off the coffee this month, but yeah, the sleep aspect of it is what's the toughest. And I mean, normally during Ramadan, we aside from the fasting, we also have additional prayers. We go for it at night at the mosque, which would tend to be an hour long. And because of COVID and not having the congregational prayers and stuff like that, we don't have that. So we're doing it on our own at home. It's a little and it's shortened up. But even then, the lack of sleep is what takes a toll.
Now, are you utilizing the Zoom technology at the mosque as well for prayer services?
Not for prayer services, because it's the concept is to actually to congregate and to come together. We can't do that for our physical prayers, but for lectures and stuff like that, there are mosques that are doing that. Yes, they're using the Zoom technology. One local mosque is doing that in particular. And they have lectures 2 or 3 times a week.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I also think that some mosques are streaming a service not for you to pray along with them,
Correct.
but for an educational.
To watch, to hear the Quran, being recited, because that's one of the things that's done in that prayer in the evening is the Quran is recited during that prayer, and they're screaming that so that you can hear the Quran.
Now, the Quran seems to be greatly misinterpreted
Mm-hmm.
by media. especially.
So are Jewish and Christian scriptures, but
Yeah.
but yes, but no, you're right. You're right.
No, that's true too. Yeah.
Everything is misinterpreted. People love to do that. But you're right. The Quran. Well, first of all, the Quran is only in Arabic.
Yeah, the true Quran is only in Arabic. Yes. So even like somebody like me, I was born in Pakistan. My natural or first language is Urdu, which is the language spoken in Pakistan. My second language is English. I've had to learn to read Arabic, to read the Quran. I can't speak Arabic. I understand some words here and there, but that's I was taught to read Arabic. I know the Arabic alphabet.
My wife was fortunate enough to spend, I think it was 3 or 4 years in Pakistan,
Oh.
in Lahore.
Oh, that's where I was born.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
There'll be some conversations later.
She loved it. And ironically, she still could remember a few words in Urdu.
Oh, okay.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Wow.
So yeah, well here's a couple of details about Islam. Most Muslims are Asian, not Arab. That's something that a lot of people don't realize
Correct.
Yeah, Pakistan is Asia.
too. Yeah.
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 So is India.
So is India. Yeah.
Yeah, right. The second most populous country in the world, and it's got a whole lot less land than China. That's number 1. We're number 3. Indonesia's number 4. You've got 2 big Muslim populations in 2 of those 4 countries. You've got Muslims in China, and of course you've got Muslims in America as well. So there's a reason why Islam is a very large religion. And as I also like to point out to my Christian friends, the reason that Christianity is the largest religion is because the net of Christianity is so big. Right? If you don't include all those folks that everybody thinks are heretics, then then you don't have that large population. Right? So Christianity is officially defined as those religions that follow the teachings, the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. And that includes the Christian Science, Jehovah's Witness, the Messianic Jews, because they're not really Jewish, they're really Christian.
Right.
All of the different Baptists.
Do the Mormons fall into that? Or?
Mormons fall into it. Latter-day Saints fall into it because they're all still connected into a Jesus piece. Now, having said that, it's also important to realize something that Muhammad might or might not have mentioned on his own, but Jesus plays a big role in the Quran as well. He sits at the right hand of God, and he's there for Judgment Day to be the Messiah.
Actually, I don't have that as part of Islam, as being on the right side of God and being there for judgment. As far as Jesus goes in Islam, we do believe in his mother to be the most holiest woman that walked the earth. There's a whole chapter dedicated to her in the Quran, named after her.
Really?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, and we also believe in the miraculous birth of Jesus, and it's so much so that he defended his mom from the cradle. So we believe in his miraculous birth. The only differences are the biggest difference is that we believe in Jesus to be a prophet and not the Son of God.
Right.
We also believe he will return. That he will return, just as Christians believe also. And that's where he's going to be able to pretty much fight against the Antichrist and bring peace to the world.
Put everything back together.
Right.
The way it should be.
Correct.
And that's why the definition of Christianity is worded as carefully as it is, so that it doesn't include Islam, because Jesus does have a role in Islamic tradition. So it has to differentiate between Islam and Christianity. In Judaism, there is no role for Jesus to play. That's the piece. And so, you have to, who was that one televangelist who said, we don't want to convert the Jews, we just want them to accept Jesus. It's like, that is conversion, folks.
Yes.
That is conversion.
What do you call it? Sure.
Because that's a whole different theology. Just as the Muslims say that Jesus is the same as the rest of us, if you will, perhaps holier. Judaism says, we're all children of God. We're all God's children. That's the definition of humans. And of course, Judaism, the books are closed before Jesus was ever born. So there's a whole lot of different stuff that goes into play. into the role of different religious leaders. But we're not, we all have a golden rule.
Mm-hmm.
We all try to teach people to love all of God's creation. We all believe in one creator of one universe, Hindus included. And a lot of people don't realize Hindus believe in a supreme God. They believe in a creator God, not multiple universes. And yes, they have Parivar. And I think that it's unfortunate that those are called gods. That's, I think, a function of religion, of language rather, not religion, that they're misunderstood. They're incarnations of the one true God. Ooh.
Plural?
Yeah, they have incarnations. Of course, think about it a minute, right? In Christianity, you've got manifestations, Father, Son, Holy Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so how different are they? It starts to become, how many different kinds of rice do you have? Are they all rice?
Well, with the Muslims, is there like a hierarchy there, like there would be, say, at the Vatican or something like that?
There used to be a caliphate. Basically, the person who was in charge, the Prophet Muhammad obviously was the first statesman, and he was the one in charge. And after him, there were the caliphates that took over, and that ended with the end of the Ottoman Empire in World War I.
Wow.
Yeah. But there are different schools, major schools like Al-Azhar University in Cairo. There's schools in Medina, Mecca, Medina, Saudi Arabia. They help facilitate things, and there's different scholar councils around the world. Like there's one in North America, the Islamic Society of North America. They have a council that helps us with navigate through different things. So you have that, but an actual hierarchy like the Vatican and stuff like that, no, we don't have that.
Yeah, and Judaism doesn't have that either. Christianity has it because when Constantine and the Caesars after him, right, the emperors after him, made Christianity a state religion, it became incorporated into the structure of the state. And that's because in Rome, the Roman religion was part of a state function, right? And I'm going to have Christians all over me.
A state religion.
I'm going to have Christians all over me, but if you look at the Cairo, I think that stands for Christos Roy, a Savior King, not just the first two letters of Christos.
Ooh.
Yeah. Because if you look at how it's used by Constantine, I really don't think he thought there was anyone bigger than him. But that's an opinion. It was all about solidifying his power. There's a great line in a documentary that the BBC did, in which they put these words, and I don't know if it's a quote of Constantine's or not. And it says, "I believe in whichever God looks favorably upon my ventures."
Okay.
So, that gives you an idea, right? So it's extreme egocentric behavior on his part.
You think?
Yeah, and I don't think there's anything about Constantine. If you look at how he's plastered all over the place in his time, coins, banners, etc. But that was Constant. Well, and his sister's name is Constantia, right? So you can thank Mother Helena for all of some of that. And she was a Christian. She's the one who went through, quote unquote, the Holy Land, collecting up the cross and all, whatever relics she thought she found. I have to wonder how many crosses you could put together of all the relics she brought back, and how many crowns of thorns there are all over, etc. She was an interesting lady.
Depends on the number of gift shops.
I got
sorry. That's terrible.
Yeah, you, the Catholic. Right. But, so there's an important piece there to recognize the difference between a separation of church and state and when a religion becomes incorporated into the government. Right. And Judaism has always said that's really very bad, and is one of the reasons why the Hasmonean dynasty is not looked upon as kindly as it might otherwise have been. And that immediately precedes Jesus. That's the Maccabees. They were both priests and kings, and the rabbis almost vilify them because of it. Because of the recognition that if you've got too much power in any one person, it starts to get messy. And that's being really nice about it. And that, of course, the Hasmoneans lead to Herod, which leads to a whole lot of other stuff, which, etc. But gets, not very good. So, can we all get together? I think eventually we're going to have to. And I think that things like this pandemic are God's invitations to do that.
Yeah.
Right?
No doubt about it.
It's, eventually we'll evolve into a species that can cooperate better. I have to believe that. I believe that's the end goal. We're far from it. We're not there. But until we start to learn to share things and to recognize, and there's more than one way to approach God. As Muhammad said, that's God's mercy, God's gift. Mm-hmm. That's another quote that almost never makes it into the media.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Never heard it.
Yeah. I don't know where in the Quran it is offhand, but...
as far as God's mercy?
Yeah.
Oh, it's numerous places.
Yeah. And here's another piece out of Jewish Christian tradition. Don't touch a foot of Seir's land, for I have my own covenant with them. Ooh. And that would be Jordan. Yeah. Yeah. So for those who are
smokes.
into, there's all kinds of stuff. I love to read that one. One of the things that I miss from Tucson is the peace walks that we used to have. The Jewish Christian, the Jewish Muslim Jewish peace walks. It's actually called the Tucson Peace Walk, but it traditionally went 1 year from an Islamic, either a school or a mosque, or and ended at a synagogue or a Jewish school, and the other years, so even years it was one way, and odd years it was the other way. I can't remember the sequence, but it went back and forth. And there was a group that used to plan it, and it started out with, obviously with prayers and food, and then we walked, and sometimes we did a mid-stop at a church, depending on if it was on the route or not. Whenever we could work it in, we did. We took a water break, because in Tucson you take many water breaks.
You have to, yes.
And
yeah.
And then we would continue on to the end of the walk, and then we would have meals. And what I loved about all of that was that the Buddhist and Hindu community would provide the meals at the end.
Wow.
So we had this wonderful vegetarian fare.
Wow. Okay.
Vegan meals that were just incredible. And I mean, they brought, their organization's very big in Tucson, and they brought just trays upon trays of delicious hot food. We would end with that. We would do Maghrib, and we would do a Jewish service at the end to conclude the day. But we also had dialogues, and we had activities. One of the popular activities was stone soup. And it was a wonderful sick.
What's that?
It's a wonderful sick woman who did that. So it's based on a story. Fox is hungry, and he comes up with an idea, and he says to everybody, "Hey, I can make this soup with this magical stone. All I need is a big pot and some water." And so, he gets the pot and the water. The elephant and some and other animals bring the I think it's the bear and the elephant who bring the pot and the water. And then, of course, once it's starting to boil, somebody says, "Well, I think some beans would be really good in there. I think some carrots would be really good in there." And slowly but surely,
So it's a stew.
It's a stew by the time it's done, and it's delicious, right? And everybody thanks Fox for his great idea.
I love it.
Right, but it's again another story of sharing, which I won't take time today, but if somebody reminds me next week, maybe we will write this one down and keep it. I'll talk about the story of the loaves and the fish in the Christian Gospels, because that's also a story of sharing. And sharing is probably the most important thing that we as children of God can do. Whether it's however we do it in the community, it needs to happen. And it needs to happen with love and with compassion and without manipulation.
I'm sorry, can I just make
Absolutely.
a quick shameless plug there on that subject? I'm personally involved, and I love it, and I've been trying to get more people involved in it. One of the best things we have going here in St. Lucie County is a soup kitchen under the name of Sarah's Kitchen.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, you bet.
And I just love the concept, and that's exactly what this is about. It's about multi-faiths coming together and sharing and helping. And I love being part of that organization. I love Bob Carey. He's one of my heroes.
Absolutely.
If anything, there's nothing else you can do, get involved with them. Get involved with them. They can always use volunteers. So, just a shameless plug there.
Hey,
no,
that's great.
And clearly more and more sites are needed to offer what Sarah's Kitchen does, because Sarah's Kitchen doesn't stay just in one location. It travels and it offers people things. So, yeah.
So, okay. So, Mohammed, why is the Quran so misunderstood?
Well, one is that it's very difficult, and I think Hebrew is the same way also, to translate those Aramaic languages, the Semitic languages, into English. That's one thing, or into other languages, for that matter.
Yeah, I think we were joking last week. There's no King James version of the Quran.
There isn't. The uniqueness of the Quran is, like I said, Arabic is not my first language, but I've learned to read the language. And we've also spoke about the majority of Muslims being in Asia. If you've seen the movie The Book of Eli, and the big thing at the end with Denzel Washington being able to recite the Bible, to us that's normal. There's millions of Muslims that have memorized the Quran, millions, not thousands, millions. They have that's how it's preserved in the Arabic format.
Wow.
Yeah, the Imam here in Fort Pierce, and his 3 sons and his 4th one is on his way. They have it memorized, and that's they do a feed every night. They're reciting it in their prayer, and that's why people are watching it. But that's one of the ways it's preserved. But the reason it's misinterpreted is I think it's a person's intention on how you want to go into something and look at something. If you want to go into it with the mindset of, Muslims are bad, and let me go find something bad in there, then that's what you're going to find. Like, for example, during Ramadan, that's one of the things we do is we go back and review the Quran also, and I was doing that. And I was talking about the verse in chapter, I forget what the number is, 14 I think it is. And the 5th verse talks about slay them where you find them. Slay the infidels where you find them. Well, the very next verse says, but if they put down their weapons and show mercy, then you show mercy also. They don't go to they don't go to the verses before or after. They only go to the verse that talks about that. And then you have to understand the context of what that was revealed about. It wasn't just about going and finding infidels and killing them. It was just about, after all the years of persecution, the Muslims finally go back to Mecca, and the majority of the Meccans became Muslims without any bloodshed. But there were some few that still did not want to accept Islam, and God gave the command that you have 4 months to go and either accept Islam or you leave the lands. And if you don't leave after those 4 months, we have given you plenty of chances. And now you got to leave. And then it talks about even after those 4 months, if they ask you for a safe passage to leave, to help them. So there's context in it, but it's a matter of just going and find words. And you can do the same thing with the Bible, but it's a matter of what your intention is to go into something. If you go into with an open mind, then you may learn something, obviously. So
that's fascinating, though, that the verbal, the handing down verbally of the Quran. I think that's great.
Yeah.
And that used to be a tradition. I think that a lot of it has gone by the wayside as we've developed the skill of writing and books, right? And we talked last week about biblos being where they learn to stitch paper into leaves and make codices, or make books, biblos. It's why it's a bibliography, folks, and why it's a bibliothèque in some languages for the library. It's in Russian and it's in Spanish and wonder about. Yeah. And the Bible is simply the book, of which the Quran also says children of the book.
Mm-hmm. That's how they refer to Christians and Jewish people.
Yeah.
Because we believe in the previous testaments also.
Sacred story.
Wow.
Yeah. Right.
It's amazing how close everything is in reality.
Yeah.
You know, when you look, one of the things that, as I started to study different religions, that was hammered into me and is very true, is that, the Buddhist looks at you and all of the Abrahamic faiths look very, very similar. Because they do. They all have pretty much the same sacred stories. And then when you really step even further back and you look at the sacred story of the Hindus, the different sacred stories that they've got, you look at the Zoroastrian sacred story, you look at even Confucius and the Tao, right, Lao Tzu, the Tao Te Ching. You look at all of these stories, and if you really step back, they are all saying pretty much the same thing in slightly different language. And of course, languages are, people speak different language. And it's people who are phobic, right, who have irrational fears. One of those fears is of things that are different and not knowing and not being able to control. So if people can speak another language and they can talk in front of you, behind you.
Did you just say not being able to control?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Right. And so, right. So if people can talk behind your back in front of you, then it sets up all kinds of opportunities for mistrust. And, we see a lot of that kind of thing. As people start to lose their facility in hearing, they start to become convinced that people are talking about them. Right. So there's this ongoing fear of being out of control. And that shades a lot of how we look at what's going on around us in the world. And to what Muhammad says, people cherry pick phrases out of scriptures all the time. Probably the most famous one is, there shall come a young woman who will have a child, right, which is used in Christianity as the foretelling of Jesus. But if you read the next sentence, it says, before that child knows right from wrong, things will have changed. A force will have come in from the north. It's talking about a king of Israel who was born not in the palace, but born in a sequestered location so that he could survive. And it's saying, that king will be born away from where everybody knows it, and then things will restore the throne, etc. Because that was going on throughout the Jewish history. There's all kinds of stuff because we're in a world and people are doing all kinds of stuff. And unfortunately, there are nasty people. There are fearful people. There are mean people in all cultures. And they use and abuse religion. Right. And it's not okay to just say, hey, they're not really XYZ, the no true Scotsman fallacy. They're still Scots, but they're a bad Scot. Right. And so we can look at something like ISIS. It's not that they're not Muslim. They're Muslim because they're in a country where the dominant religion is Muslim. The odds are pretty good. The bad guys are going to be Muslim. They're using Islam as a weapon, even against other Muslims.
Correct.
And Muslims usually are the victims of.
Yeah.
Oh, very much.
Majority, yeah.
Very much. The majority.
Sure.
Yeah. And so it's bad people using whatever they think they can use to control people. I've seen Christians try to use that, right? God is, no, I'm sorry, no. God is what's good and redeeming in our lives and gives us strength and wisdom, not what teaches us to pound on others. Right? That's your little g God inside you. That's not you being a bigger, better person. That, to me, is the bottom line of all religions. And so, to me, that's the big power out of Ramadan, the Jewish Yom Kippur, same kind of thing. That's a 25-hour fast. So that's a daylight night, but it's one day. and except for cantors and rabbis for whom it's 26 because you got to get ready for the service.
Going back to talking about the scaring aspect, that's one of the things that, and I don't mean to get political, but it just baffles me how some people are just out here talking about how, they're just trying to scare you with this coronavirus, but these are the same people that use fear to, propaganda up against Islam. And that's what I've seen. So it's like...
Fear is their go-to weapon.
Exactly.
Fear is their go-to weapon.
Yeah.
And that's been going on for decades.
Yeah.
I mean, that's nothing new.
And, I've also talked about it other times with my teaching of Chinese kids. I watched them discover the virus. Right. And we've had other viruses. We've had SARS, the Spanish flu, Ebola, the Black Plague, and, this is just the next wave, folks. And I wear a ring that says Gamze Ya'avor, this too shall pass. Right.
Sure.
Because that's an important thing to remember. This novel version of coronavirus is novel because we didn't have it 2 years ago. But 2 years from now, it won't be new and novel anymore. But it'll still be around. We're not going to eradicate it. We haven't learned how to eradicate viruses yet. We've learned how to ameliorate symptoms. We've learned how to treat people who catch it. We get better at that over time. And we do create vaccines that work some of the time. Right, Greg?
Yeah.
Work some of the time because the vaccine's not a guarantee.
Well,
either.
we still don't have a vaccine for AIDS. So, I mean, that's from the 80s.
Yeah, and that's a huge, huge virus. So, folks, stay safe. Wash your hands. Follow good protocols, whether you're Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist. I don't care what you are. Even if you think you have no religion, you in fact have one, because religion is a belief in the cosmos and how they were created. And everybody has one. They're just different.
Yeah.
And that is God's mercy. So I'm going to send out to all of our Muslim friends and to you again, Ramadan Mubarak. May it be a wonderful time. For those of you who are joining us tonight for Third Friday, that's a wonderful thing. We've got curbside Shabbat meals. Thank you, 2Js, for partnering with us. And, we stream all the time.
So where do we find the stream?
You can find the stream on Facebook Live. And it's public, so you don't even have to have a huge thing. You can just get there, and anybody can watch it and join. So, and they stay there. They're archived. So, many different ways that we do it. So thank you, Mohammed, for coming and being part of today's broadcast. Everybody, I think we didn't get any calls, but that's usually a sign when people are really interested.
They're really paying attention.
They're paying attention. Yeah. You get the calls when you've irritated somebody and they want their view. And that's not always true. Sometimes there are questions, and we love the callers. So, but I'm sure people were very interested, and so thank you very much for joining me, especially during this holy month.
And come on back too.
Yeah, absolutely. You're welcome anytime.
Thank you.
And so this has been Rabbi Shafir Lobb for Congregation Eitz Chaim in Port St. Lucie, and Mohammed Malik from the Islamic community also. Have a wonderful week. See you next week at 11:05 on WPSL, WSTU, and all of the other things.
This is WPSL, Port St. Lucie.